Hi, everybody. I have a special guest here with me. Say hi to Howard Blum. He's a Pulitzer Prize nominated author, and he's been covering the Moscow student murders since the beginning. Isn't that right, Howard?
That's right. Since about a week after they happened, I was on my way out to Idaho. First time ever in Idaho.
It was really your first time and you went to Moscow?
Yes, I read about the story and I got in my mind the idea that perhaps I've been a reporter for a number of years. I covered a lot of stories. Maybe I could try to solve this case because it was perplexing. Back in those days, they were still looking for a suspect. So I went out there and I immediately thought, well, I've got the answer to the case because I went to the murder house. I saw where it was situated, and I assumed that perhaps someone of one of the fancier houses around there that were just in the cul-de-sacs would have seen these kids, seen their exuberance, their beauty, their youth, and become rageful by this image of all that was being deprived to him, that the fantasy of them was a rebuke to everything that his life had become. So I went and spoke with some of the people who I thought might be involved in this. There were various groups in town that had problems with the authorities, groups that had been brought up on sexual charges. And I met with them, and I'm in an interview with one of them, and I realize I'm in a closed room, and these people are against vaccines. It's the height of the pandemic. And 2 days later, I didn't solve the case, but I got COVID.
No, you didn't.
So that was my first experience in Moscow.
Moscow got you COVID. Are we having echo? Maybe I should mute or lower something. So we've been talking for a while, Howard, and you have been on this case from the beginning. And I went back and listened to some of your Megyn Kelly interviews that she dropped. You know, she put them into pieces.
Right.
And I was really astonished that even back then you were saying, like, this is March, one of them is like March of 2023. It's well over a year ago. And it was really interesting that you were like, look, like they're botching this, like basically in so many words, So what do you think has changed since you've undertaken this assignment of basically writing about this for Airmail? And now your book's coming out the 25th of June. It's a big deal.
Well, it's a big deal for me. I hope for other people too. And a lot in the book I can't talk about now at this stage. But the book, When the Night Comes Falling, a Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders, what I try to do is talk about the case and shed new light onto it. And I cover certain areas that made the case particularly perplexing. And I discovered, as I hope people will read in When the Night Comes Falling, that there was a major feud between the authorities, between the Moscow Task Force and the FBI. And that had ramifications. How the Moscow police at times were close to the suspect and they didn't even know it. How the DNA figures into the case, the personalities of many of the people involved. And what I try to do in the book really is tell a story. I want readers to be engrossed in a mystery, but the book's subtitle is that it's a requiem, a memorial prayer for the dead students, and I want them to appreciate their lives and what could have been. That was the thing. Zaina at her high school graduation wore a mortarboard with the words, "For the lives I will change," and it's poignant and deeply, deeply unsatisfying that she'll never get the opportunity to change those lives. But as I went out to tell the story, the biggest narrative challenge is, how do you try to structure this story? How do you tell a tale like this? When an artist paints a picture, he moves his easel all around till he gets the right angle on it, and he then tries to create the scene. And I think I think I'll leave it to the readers to decide. I think I've found a way that allows me to get into the narrative. And what I do without giving too many details away is one of the most astonishing parts of this very astonishing and perplexing story is the cross-country trip that Michael Koberger takes with his son Brian. The two of them in a car, shoulder to shoulder, making their way across virtually the entire width of America, and how the father slowly comes to a realization of what is going on. And that trip becomes sort of the touchstone for the book that I wrote, and for the story I tell, and for the narrative that I hope involves readers.
And you write so well, Howard.
Thank you.
No, you do. I love it. And I love that even on Megyn Kelly's, you said like going through Moscow is like you compare it to a yawn, right? Like you get through it so fast. Like you're very good with your words. And you just mentioned one of the things you talk about in the book is the cross-country trip, right? And I know you can't talk about the book that much. And you did get a lot of access. You can't say who, because there's a gag now, but you do in the book, you shed a lot of light on things we may not know because you had access to sources, right?
So what I tried to do is do something that the FBI did. What they did with their investigative genetic genealogy is they tried to build family trees so they can track down these clusters, these family clusters, so they work their way up to a suspect. Well, inspired by that idea, I tried to take clusters of various families, people involved in the case, and even if some people were restrained by the gag order, well, there were people on the outer limbs who still had contact with them, who spoke with them, and I sort of knocked on their doors, tried to get to them, and they allowed me to write with accuracy and verisimilitude, and I think with a certain poignancy, or what these key actors in the case were thinking and feeling as things evolved.
I love that, actually. That's a really good point that you say, Howard, is they did let you in, and we'll find out about that. So his book, you guys, drops June 25th. The description has a link, his Amazon link, that you could pre-order the book. And Howard, you should do some tours where you do some signings. Are you doing that?
I'm going to do a little bit out here. I'm going to be on Good Morning America, on Nightline. There's going to be an excerpt in People, another excerpt in the New York Post, and also in the Daily Mail. So it should get some attention, and the news will get some notice. But what I hope most of all, I'd like to think it's just sort of a pretty good mystery story that people can get wrapped up in, because this is a story ultimately about people, the characters involved, the victims, and the parents who survive are also victims in many ways. The town itself is a character. A father who takes it upon himself to try to avenge his daughter's death. That too, to me, is very poignant. He wants to solve the crime. Steve Goncalves, he's a character in this. Even though I didn't speak with him, I tried to get from people close to him a sense of a man who literally stares at the camera and tells the killer, "We are coming to get you." And that's a pledge to himself and also to the killer, a pledge of retribution. And there's something noble and powerful and also poignant about a father making that pledge to avenge his dead daughter.
That's right. And he said, "Don't make me be the alpha." And what do you think is one of the hardest things for people to wrap their head around when it comes to this case?
Well, there's several things. At this moment, I think that the trial keeps on getting delayed and delayed and delayed. The Supreme Court under the Sixth Amendment gives you the right to a speedy trial, but there also are caveats to that allow it to be delayed. but there is a statement that lawyers sort of make: when you have the facts, you pound them. When you don't have the facts, you go into the courtroom and you pound the table. And I think in this case, I think the defense is pounding the table. And why am I being so cynical? Well, if I were guilty of a crime, I hope my lawyers would be shouting it from the rooftops to get me out of jail. And also, you want to find the people who are responsible, the person who was responsible for the 4 murders. Well, now it's been nearly 2 years, and the alibi that they've come up with is that Brian Kohberger was out looking at the stars on a park by himself at 4 a.m. on a frigid morning in Washington State. And they have really no supporting evidence. And I'd like to see, I think it's time for the memory of the victims, for the sanity of their families, and even for the town of Moscow, that a trial should get some hard answers to what really happened. That's one part of the story. The other part of the mystery is, the motive. To this day, and I touch a bit on this in my book, what is the motive of anyone, be it Brian Kohberger or whoever is the actual killer, would be set in a court of law to kill these 4 people. Both the prosecution and the defense have made clear that Brian Kohberger had none whatsoever contact with any of the victims. Well, that throws out a lot of theories. And in my book, I give an idea of what I believe happened. But I think another key element is on the morning of the late night at 3 a.m. of the murders, a white car goes by the murder house, not once, not twice, but 3 times before it finally parks, and someone descends down the hill. Well, many people have said that the assailant was stalking the house. I don't think that's quite accurate. I think it's something much more complex. I think the assailant, whoever it is, whether it be Kohberger or someone else, was trying to find the will to commit this horrific crime. And he was fighting against himself. Each time he went there, he wanted to escape, but he was pulled back as if by a magnetic force. He could not escape from the demons that were rushing inside of him. And when he finally turns off the ignition key of the Hyundai, whoever is the assailant, turns it off, it takes the strength of a Hercules. His mind is made up, and he enters a world where no sane man can ever enter. He enters in this world and becomes a killer that makes this decision.
Do you think that, have you seen the newest hearing where they had expert Cy Ray, the defense brought up expert Cy Ray, and he made the tracks, Nexus Lexus has bought it, and it was kind of to help law enforcement get all of cell data in one place, and he's really good with it. And he basically said he has exculpatory evidence that doesn't put Brian there. Now, whether that's because Brian didn't have his phone or it's because Brian is cloud-based, who knows? But have you heard that one yet, Howard?
Yes, I have. And also, there's a Colorado court where the judge said he had, I think it was reserves or reservoirs rather of uncertainty about Cy Ray's testimony. So
interesting. I wonder if that was a personal thing. The person in Colorado. I'm not a fan of Colorado. Maybe that's why I'm like,
that's one theory. But the idea that between 2:47 and 4:48, the phone is turned off, just coincidentally when the murders occur, that no one sees him, that he goes to this park, which is impossible to pronounce, Wawahai Park, I think it is. They say whenever you see it, it rhymes with Hawaii. I haven't found any word that ever rhymes with Hawaii. But,
you're so right.
It's just too many coincidences. And I think what the defense is doing, and they have every right to do this, is trying to buy as much time, trying to throw as many different pieces of evidence in the courtroom to see if they can save their client's life. Because remember, this is a capital crime.
That's right.
And if it could, even if he's convicted, if Kohberger is convicted, he could face possibly a firing squad. If the chemicals that are necessary for a lethal injection are not available, and they often aren't, Idaho passed a law last spring and went into effect last summer that allows specifically, it seems, tailored for Brian Kohberger, for him to have to face a firing squad. This is brutal stuff, and I can imagine his lawyers, defending him with all their heart. At the same time, Ann Taylor has said she publicly in the courtroom, she believes completely in Brian Kohberger's innocence. Every time he appears, she makes a point, if you watch the hearings, of putting her arm, protectively around his shoulder. Her colleague, Ms. Massoud, also said, quote, "It's a privilege to be able to defend Brian Kohberger." So if it's such an honor, such a privilege, if they believe in his guilt, I would hope to see a much more robust and persuasive defense, and one that doesn't seem to me just an exercise in buying time.
And we're in the pretrial motions right now, so we're going to see a lot of that, especially with the capital case, because there's a lot at stake. I have a question.
We're talking about pretrial motions. We're looking at pretrial motions that could go on for years. I mean, at the end of this summer, on August 29th, there's a motion for a change of venue. If they get a change of venue, well, then the trial could be delayed a year longer than next summer. It could be 2 years from now before it takes place, between the back and forth. And let me also add, which I've written about before, so I can discuss it. It's not really in the book, that I think it's a mistake for the defense to try to move the trial out of Moscow. Why do I say that?
Yeah.
Well, a large part of the jury pool would be taken from the Kirker Church there, which is a sort of fundamentalist, often right-wing. It's as much a political activist group as it is a church group. And they have been protesting vehemently against the COVID restrictions during the pandemic. There are many court cases that came out of that. The head of the church, Pastor Doug Wilson, who's an extremely articulate, very persuasive man who controls his flock, 2,000 strong in a town of 25,000, which is a large contingent, very effectively. He has told me that if I had to recommend to my people to believe any Moscow cop who gets on the stand to give testimony about Brian Kohberger, well, I'll tell them to be quite suspicious, because we've had our own run-ins with the Moscow police, and he said, we know they lie. We know they lie.
Wow.
So I think they'll have many misgivings about what the authorities have to say. And again, they will be a large part of the jury pool, especially if you think anyone with connections to the university would be prohibited or immediately dismissed from being on the jury.
And so what are they called again? What's the congregation called again?
The Christ Church, Doug Wilson's, the Kirkers, that they're commonly known. The Kirkers is a Scottish name.
Okay, the Kirkers.
And Wilson, and I've spoken with him a couple of times, is a very effective orator. He's remarkably articulate. He has a logic that can be quite persuasive. And it also is a belief that controls. He has direct control over all his parishioners. He's determined, and this is also part of the story of Moscow, that it's a town that's deeply divided. It's almost on the verge of the Civil War, because at one point, one part of the town, you have a very liberal university a school that's been rated as the best party school in the state. And then you have this fundamentalist church group that wants to create sort of, as Wilson has said, a theocracy. He wants this to be a Christ-oriented town that's with a belief in fundamentalist American values, which is totally antithetical to sort of the university's more liberal view of life, and a university where there is, and this is another element of the case that I can't really get into now, but in my book, there's a strong drug community in the university. You know, Fraternity Row, there's a great deal of drug dealing there, and that's an element of the case, and one the defense might want to pursue if they were trying to make an argument more than the more specious that his phone was turned off for 2 hours, or he's out in the woods stargazing.
I was going to ask you about the fraternity. Were you able to get any interviews with any, are you allowed to say, I don't know if you're allowed to say, were you able to get any interviews?
I can say I spoke to several students that allowed me to get a picture of the kids. It should be made known, I mean, just for the kids' reputation, the victim's reputation, that none of them were involved in drugs. According to what I discovered about the autopsies, that there was no drugs in any of their systems in the autopsies, and you don't want to impugn their reputations or their memory.
So was the fraternity easy? Like, did you get to talk to anybody in that fraternity? Was it possible?
You know, it's not easy, but I did speak to students who were involved in it. And, you know, fraternity life is very much a part of this story, because this is a story about kids, you know, young, attractive kids having fun. Key to me, I wrote about very early on in one of the airmail pieces, is that video of the cops just before school has started, or maybe it was the first week of classes. The cops are coming to the house on King Road for their second noise complaint, and classes have just started. And you can see the kids giving the cops a hard time, and the cops having their own sort of antagonisms as they empty out their Trulies onto the ground to sort of get back at them. But you can see that these kids are young, they're having fun. You know, poet once said that there's beauty in exuberance, and that, you know, these kids were young and beautiful, and that just adds to the tragedy.
No, it's true. I mean, and you know, you're dealing with parents who've lost a lot, and so I understand like how that gets a little bit tricky when it comes to dealing with that. But when you just dropped something kind of big about, and I glided over it, about the autopsies. So they were found with no drugs in their bodies. Is that?
That's what I've been told. Yes. I mean, one of the key things in this case, and what I get into in my book, was the grand jury hearing, and grand jurors talk, and they talk to people, and people talk to reporters. I mean, the introduction to the book, I talk about my time at the New York Times, where I was there for about 12 years as a reporter, and I was involved in a very complex story in the South Bronx about a drug ring that involved voodoo and 38 murders. And yet I was having a hard time getting people to confide in me. And I remember going to the city editor then, who was Sidney Schamberg, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner for the work he did in Cambodia. His exploits were made into the Killing Fields movie. And Sid told me, you know, you got to just keep at it, Howard. People talk. That was his mantra. People talk. And I kept on, you know, knocking on doors and going around in Moscow, also in Pennsylvania too. That's a large part of the story, and in Washington State, and people eventually bought. So I was able to put these pieces together, come up with what I think is some news, and at the same time tell a unified story. I mean, the early reviews have called the book compelling, and that to me as a writer is supreme compliment, because you want people to turn the pages. You want people to get involved in the story. And as tragic as this is, as how horrific some of the details are, I'd like to believe that I did what the critics have said, and I've created a compelling story.
I think everyone would want to read it, whether they agree with what, your position is, or like whoever told you the info or not. It's just fascinating. We've been wrapped up in this case since it dropped. Lana and I got a lot of the body cams that were out there. We got them first. We got a body cam that nobody could get. And we held on to it for a minute because people weren't looking in the right place. They put in the wrong address. But Lana has a question, and I think this is a good one. She says, you always thought that this wasn't an open and shut case after the latest court dates. Looks like your thoughts at the beginning were correct. The data and phone, not so much.
Well, between open and shut, there's a wide shadow that falls. And I think what people will get from after reading my book, without giving too much away, that perhaps the authorities have the right suspect, but boy, the way they built this case, they're going to have a hard time convicting him in a court of law. And that too is another tragedy. I think the law enforcement case, as I point out, has a lot of structural weakness.
I tend to agree with that a lot. And do you think that it might be Brett Payne's inexperience, or do you think that Coomer Scott Green has something to do with it?
I mean, what kind of experience can anyone have in a quadruple murder? I don't want to impugn, Payne or any of the other people involved. It's a monumental task, and I think it becomes exasperated by the squabbles between the different law enforcement groups involved in the case, and that's something I go into detail in When the Night Comes Calling.
Did you get to talk to C. Scott Green?
Well, I'm not going to tell you who I talked to, but I will say, as I've mentioned before, I got into this case early, and I was out there, I guess within a week of the murders, and at that point there was no gag order, and so I was able to make a lot of connections. There are some very good restaurants in Moscow on Main Street. It's a terrific Italian place, and I was able to have a lot of meals there with people and get to talk. And these people were able to introduce me to other people and to build connections, build bridges that I was able to use. And also, as I said, I was a reporter of investigations at the Times for well over a decade, and I made some contacts in law enforcement that I was able to call on, and they came through with providing me information.
That's important. I know, how important sources are in writing, and sometimes keeping your source under seal. Has that ever worked for you, where you've been called in to testify or reveal a source? Have you ever had to deal with that before, Howard?
I haven't had to reveal sources. I've been involved at one of the times where there were sometimes my stories were questioned and the sources came forward and the documents came forward, and we were able to save the day. One of the great things about the Times is that they stand by their reporters. And in these times that we live in journalism, under siege and being threatened from all sorts of authorities, you want a institution that's going to back you up, and that's one of the great powers and the great strengths of the New York Times.
Annie P wants to know, does Howard model this book or his writing style after Truman Capote's In Cold Blood?
Well, I wish I could write like Truman Capote.
You can.
It would be kind to say that, but he was a master. But I do, this is a nonfiction narrative. And that, what do I mean by that? And usually, I've done 16 books, and they've all, well, some are history, some are about spies, intelligence matters. They all are nonfiction narratives. And what I do is I tell true stories. Every quote in the book is accurate. Every fact in the book is accurate. But I'm able to find situations where I can let the characters guide you through the story. I find a narrative way into the story, a way of telling it. And without giving too much away, as I say in this story, this book is predicated, is held together by this cross-country trip. Father and son are taking across America, and the father is coming slowly and slowly and slowly to the realization, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I'm able to, again, as readers will see, get into what Michael Kohlberger is thinking, because I'm able to get to people who are close to him and who he's spoken with.
That's interesting to know. So you were able to speak, won't say who, but the book does contain some insight into Michael Kohlberger's thinking.
Yes, I think that, and again, this is a story too. The book, my book, is a story almost about two fathers, Michael Kohlberger and Steve Goncalves. They are both victims. They both have had their lives turned upside down, and there's a poignancy and a drama to each of theirs. A father trying to come to terms with the possibility that his son might be capable of killing four people, and a father, Goncalves, who says, you send a girl off to college, you send your child off to college, and she comes back to you in an urn. What could be sadder, more poignant, more devastating than that? I say that as a father of three children, but any human would feel that, I think.
Yeah, no, we kind of talked about that a little bit, and it would be really difficult. It's hard to be critical, I think, of the way that Steve Goncalves has to go about all this. I just, I think he needs to look at the state a little bit more and how they went about dismantling this case or trying to make a case out of something, because we all want, and probably them more than anyone, is justice, for this is a horrible crime. So it's just it'd be really sad if when all is said and done, their justice is, we don't get that, because there's no two bites of the apple.
And I think the people who are directly involved in this case are not just looking for justice, but I think they're looking for a measure of vengeance too. I think they want retribution. I mean, this is really ultimately a story about victims, and the living are victims too. There's a drama series that's being made out of my book by Village Roadshow Productions, and the key to making this drama work is to make these characters that make up the town of Moscow, that make up the families, come alive on the screen. And that's the challenge the screenwriters are facing, the challenge I faced in telling what is on one level, a police procedural about how you catch a suspect, how all the pieces fall into place. But on another level, it's a family drama about families caught up in the unimaginable.
Yeah, and it is. What's interesting about this, Howard, is that it's like a horror movie trope. if you really want to scare some people, talk about going into their safe place, right, at night when they're sleeping and butchering them with a knife. 4 people.
I mean, I can tell you just a small anecdote that sort of reinforces what you're saying. I'm at Moscow at the murder house in the middle of winter, not that long after the murders occurred. And I'm standing there in the house, and I'm at this point the door is boarded up, and I'm thinking to myself, well, did they board it up to keep people out or to keep the demons inside? And as I'm thinking of this, suddenly a light flashes on me. I'm caught in this light out of nowhere, and I wonder where it is. And then a voice calls out, "You better be careful. It's icy out there." And there was a security car parked catty corner to the building in the shadows, and he had a flashlight that he trapped me in. He was trying to give me a warning, but as this voice calls out and this light caught me in its cone of illumination, I couldn't help thinking about the voice calling out inside the house, "There's someone here." Can you imagine waking up in the middle of the night and hearing, "There's someone here"? The section on the murders and what transpired that night will be the key that People is excerpting, and I think that will be available on June 21st.
So you have what's coming out June 21st? Is it the People magazine article for you drops June 21st, right?
Yes.
And then on the 23rd, we have the New York Post article coming out. So you graced us with your presence before you went, and your face is going to be all over.
Well, thank you, but my face doesn't count. But they will have hopefully a bit more details, fill in the blanks. But I would like to think that this is an appetizer of the book that's coming. And also, without seeming too self-promotional, the book is going through different printings. And if you want to get a copy, one might want to early order at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, your independent bookstore. I'm all for independent bookstores too. As an author, you need them.
Yes. So I have your link in the description. They're putting it in the chat. But also, do you want to tell us about what's happening with this book? You got offered a dramatic series out of this book from the Village Roadshow. They're producing a dramatic series based on your book. Isn't that true?
Yes. They're going to do a limited series that will lead up to the suspect being caught. And it's quite possible there'll be a second one 2 years later, or whenever, when the trial, after there's a trial. But this will be sort of a story about Moscow, about the officers involved in tracking down the suspect, about the suspect and his family, about Pennsylvania, and about this cross-country journey that the book is predicated on.
And what if this does go? Do you think that you're going to write another book if this does go a little bit past a trial or another, maybe year, 2 years?
The possibility is there. I've people are talking to me would I want to write a book on the trial. I don't know when the trial is going to take place. Imagine the trial not taking place till 2026. I better, I like writing. I'm going to find some things to write about in the interim. Also, a couple of my other books are presently being made into movies, so I'm going to be busy with that. Ron Howard, the director, is making my book on the Yukon Gold Rush, the Floor of Heaven, about a cowboy detective who gets involved in a case there. He's making that into a movie, and that's. And then Rod Lurie is directing a book that I wrote earlier called The Brigade, a World War II story.
That's big news, Howard. I can't even believe that. So you're getting 2 of your books made into movies, and Ron Howard's one of the producers, or is he directing or producing?
Yeah, it's sort of fun. He somehow got a hold of the book. He was shooting something in Australia earlier this fall, and he read the book, and he liked what he read, and he saw the film potential. And the screenwriter who's doing it has a really good take on the story. and it's it's exciting.
So Murky Piglet wants to know, do any of your other stories compare to any of the writings? Okay, does the Idaho Forest Story tragedy compare any way to any writings that you've done before?
Well, all my books fundamentally are stories. It doesn't matter if the story takes place in the Yukon Gold Rush or World War II, or it's a spy story. They're all true, and they're all character-driven stories. So that's what I do with When the Night Comes Falling. And, it's probably a mistake for an author to believe all his reviews, but they have called it suspenseful and compelling. And that's what I try to do, is to create a suspenseful and compelling story. So it compares that way. One of my books won the Edgar Award for the best true crime nonfiction work. And that too was a story that took place in Los Angeles in 1910, about the bombing of the Los Angeles Times. Very intricate story. And I'd like to think that this has the same potential to be a big canvas for a big detective story.
Lana also wanted to know this question. She wants to know if you think Brian did it, do you think he acted alone?
Well, I don't want to get into that sort of specifics because I'm contractually bound, because the book has to reveal the details. But I think that's a very important question, a very wise question, and I'd like to think I present the evidence that answers it in my book.
And that'll be really interesting, you guys. You got to get the book. I know Lana and I will be reading it cover to cover, and after it's out for a while, maybe I'll read it.
I hope after you read it, if you want to talk again, I'd be glad to come back.
I would love for you to come back. It's just so amazing having you here, because it's such an honor, Howard. I mean, we've gotten to know each other a little bit, but I know Megan Kelly, so I was just like, wow, okay, Howard, let's do this.
Megan's a very smart interviewer. She's a very shrewd woman.
Yeah, she knows how. She's really good at what she does. Okay, so I have one other question I just wanted to get out there. What did you think about when you read the PCA and you heard bushy eyebrows?
I thought, boy, that's really stretching things a bit. When we talk about evidence, it's not very persuasive. I mean, can you imagine if the judge who's listening to this has bushy eyebrows? if the district attorney has bushy eyebrows, it's very thin stuff. But I will say the bushy eyebrows comes out from testimony from Dylan Mortensen. And that's one of the key mysteries of this entire story. An 8-hour gap between seeing the killer and making a phone call. That's something I get into in my book. I try to answer it, and I don't want to be too tantalizing, but it's one of the perplexities that make this entire story so mysterious. I mean, here you have no murder weapon has been found, no motive, there's no trail of blood, no blood has been found on the suspect's car. There's nothing found in Koberger's apartment. There's no break into the house. There's no sexual assault. You have all these pieces that don't add up, and detectives have to try to make sense of them. Prosecutors and defense have to make sense of them. And I think I offer a roadmap for the layman to make sense of them too in my book.
That'd be really interesting to see, because it's always bothered me, right, that they called their friends over before they called the police. And it's just like, you had them all trample through that crime scene. And stabbings, you guys, like, right? Howard, stabbings are really brutal and bloody. And you're right. Where's the blood? So it's just going to be interesting. I can't wait to read your book. Thank you so much. Let's say, well, I'll let you go so I don't keep you while I say thank you to everybody that was here. But I appreciate you so much, Howard. We'll be in contact. When the book comes out, I'm going to read it cover to cover. Everyone, please go get this book. It's very important to, if you're interested. It's kind of like whets our appetite because they were supposed to go to trial, or we were supposed to have a hearing, and you dropped it just in the nick of time for that, right? To whet our appetite.
I hope so. I hope it'll answer also a lot of questions that people have. And I appreciate you making the time tonight. And good talking with you, Bella.
Thank you so much, Howard. Have a good night. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, everybody. Okay, so you guys, Howard Blum is an amazing writer. If you haven't heard or read any of his stuff, I have a playlist that's in the description that you could read. Lana now knows what it's like to walk in with the delay. So I just want to say thanks to you guys. I obviously there's a lot of questions, and we can get to that the next time we have them on. But I wanted to give you guys a little bit of the flavor of what to expect with this book drop. And for those of us that wanted a trial, we get this instead. So Lana, thanks for the 99 cents. Love you all. Thank you so much. Don't be hating. You're so cute. Your dog is cute. Yeah, can I say thanks first? Thanks for joining Crimeland. Welcome to the family. Thank you, WB. Good to see you here. Hope you guys enjoyed this.
Billy, you brought up Papa Rogers. What'd you think about that, baby?
Why be so nosy? Thank you so much. Love your face. I think I'll answer that in a second. Moonvale, thank you so much. Butterfly Beauty, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys all being here. And I love this. Crimeland does 1122. Thank you so much. And of course, you guys, this is the link for Howard's book. It's the official link from Amazon, and it's in the description if you can't click on it here in the description of this video. What did I think? Here's the thing that, I think people... Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. I'm glad you walked it. Thank you so much. Everyone has their opinion, what they went through, you guys, right? So and what they've seen, and we're all entitled to that. And that's why it's good to hear everyone's opinions and how they got there. And this is a very fluid case, as I always say. It'll change, and you can change your mind, and you can see other things and be like, oh my God, yeah, now that doesn't make sense. To be locked into a theory, in my opinion, it's good to hear everyone's opinion. So
it's great. I think it's so great that we can I can have a different opinion, but Howard knows a lot about the people he talked to. Those people lied to him, but anyway you slice and dice it, Howard isn't making anything up.
No, that's
what's awesome. I think it's worth reading. You guys really think I like Marcia Clark? I read Marcia Clark's book, and I think she's a hoo-ha. But I still read the book because I wanted to then I have the opportunity to pick what I want out of it. You know what I mean? I get to pick what I want out of that book.
Thank you, Canadian True Crime Buff.
You did
great. I appreciate you so much.
Girl, Maddie Kelly's baby, what's up?
Thank you guys. You guys are amazing. So here's the thing. We talk a lot, you guys, behind the scenes or whatever, a lot. Thank you so much, Mooch. There's so many things that we don't bring out because we can't vet it. Howard's the same way. He'll call me up. I'll call him up and be like this. He's like, yeah, I can't vet that. Can't vet that. He doesn't run with things just willy-nilly. In journalism, there's a thing of you have to have at least two people say something, has to fit. Two independent people say something, and then, you go from there. So it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know about this. Look, I think that I'll say this, okay? I think that the state made an incredibly dumb decision when they stuck with a very narrow time frame. I think they screwed up royally with that. I don't know why they did that. It doesn't make much sense as to why, even if it happened in just a short time and they can prove it. I mean, look at Bundy if you don't believe it. But that's just, I don't know why you do that. And so as you heard Howard also say, there was conflict between the FBI and the police. So it's interesting, you guys. It's going to be an interesting read. And so it drops the 25th. You could pre-order it now. Howard's going to have a write-up in People Magazine on the 21st. New York Post on the 23rd. Good Morning America is going to be like the 24th or the 25th. There's going to be a segment. He's going to be on Nightline. And then the Village Roadshow is producing a drama series based on this book. And he's also, you know this, Elo, right? He's also going to be, he wants to do another book on another subject. So I pitched him the idea of the Drakes.
Yeah. Woo! That's what woo!
Thank you, Relax Senior. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Drake, Dr. Mo.
So I said, listen, Howard, you might want to look at this Drake Moore situation. We'll see what happens. You guys, it's really a special thing when you can get an interview like this with such a esteemed professional, and he's been boots on the ground in there. Me and Lana, so he was there when the house, so Howard was there when the house was still standing in winter. Me and Lana went this past January. The house is gone, and it's weird being there after seeing everything. Did it look small to you, like smaller to you, Elo? Like, did it look a little bit smaller? No?
The house? Yeah.
Like the area, like, don't you think?
It's tight. It's like prom night, guys. It's tight. It's tight up in there.
Okay.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Oh, Elo.
You did really good.
Thank you
That's
so
all that
much.
matters. And
Appreciate you.
The most important thing that matters is that when you respect people and you respect their work, it doesn't matter if you disagree with their opinion or the way that they want to come at something.
Yes.
It matters that you're respecting what somebody's doing, especially if they're in the same field that you are in.
Yes.
That's like how you don't have respect for somebody's efforts. That's where I can tell the difference of the real people from the fake people. I'm talking about an audience of watching. I don't want fake people to watch my stuff. I want real people to watch my stuff. You can disagree with me all day, but you cannot knock my hustle. You cannot knock my methodologies. You cannot knock my passion. And that's how I feel about Howard. He is good, and he put boots on the ground, and he went there immediately. And so I think that if you go and you compare the, it's been a couple of years, or it's about to be. I think it's interesting to see where we're at right now, because people weren't expecting us to be where we're at right now. That's the greatest thing I think about the Idaho court cases, that nobody thought we would be where we are right now. And maybe we should have had that prelim. Maybe if we would have had that prelim, other things could be happening. But they didn't. They went to your grand jury, and that's why we're where we're at. So when everybody wants to know why the delay, well, why the secrecy?
You heard what Howard said, though, right? And he doesn't make stuff up, you guys. So the grand jury people talk, and then they talk to, let's say, whoever, and then they talk to reporters. So this like secret grand jury, it is how we do it in this country, but maybe we need to look at some things a little bit differently. And we need to look at how grand juries are convened and how they do things. And it's really important.
But in this case, why don't we look at why they decided to go grand jury?
That's like a political move they usually do with death penalty cases. They'll tell you prelim and they'll like drop the grand
6
jury.
months later, though. Nobody's ever waited for 6 months to have a prelim to have to be underhanded a score job like that. They didn't have what they didn't have what they
maybe yeah.
They didn't have what they had.
No, we see that with Cy now.
Yeah, they lied about what they had, and they lied to the grand jury. And whether or not a judge wants to ever admit that, I don't give a shit. I know that it's a fugazi.
It's a fugazi. Her Italian's coming out. It's a fugazi.
But I just think you're great, Bella.
Thank you. We have one question directed at both of us. So Blue Eyed Candy wants to know, thank you for that, by the way, wants to know, Lana and Bella, if not BK, do either of you have an opinion on an alternate suspect or suspects?
The po-po. They want to do all this shit. They're going to cheat like this. We have no other option but to point to the police.
I agree, crime on.
If it ain't him, it's got to be somebody that's fucking it all up. Because there ain't no other reason to go ahead and do all this stuff.
Huh. All right, yeah.
They should be the ones on trial.
Thank you, Jesse. So you guys get this book and read it. I'm like, maybe he'll let me read it on my, HarperCollins is the one who puts it out, and they're kind of like strong arming. This is a thing that I posted 3 months ago. I'm like, wait till you guys see this, because Howard gave me the cover 3 months ago. He's like, you could put it out there, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do a live about it. So I put it out there, and like literally by the time I put it out, HarperCollins contacted him and was like, absolutely not. She could not put it out. I'm like, shoot. So everyone's like, what's going on? Why aren't you putting it out? Like, Mom can't talk about it. So now you see the cover. And so you guys, I didn't get to say this to him, but do you know what it's named? Can anybody tell me what it's named after? What do you guys think the title of the book is named after? How do you think he got it? How do you think he got the name of the book? I'll give you a hint. Okay, it's a band, it's an artist's song.
I was just gonna say a rapper.
It's not a rapper. When night comes falling. Yay, Gail. Okay, I'll give you guys another hint. Okay. Who says, come on, you guys, come on, think. The artist's first, it's a name, okay? And the person's first name starts with a B, and their last name starts with a D.
Bob Dylan.
Oh my God, hello, yes.
Bob Dylan?
It is.
Is it the Hurricane song?
No, look it up.
Okay, I was gonna get real pumped.
That's on, maybe I didn't. I don't know. But I was gonna say it's somebody that was in the house. That's the last name, Dylan. Anyways.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Lana, just it's not fair because you're ahead of everybody. So like you beat everyone to the punch because you heard it first. So yeah, well, let's okay, look, so Blue-Eyed Candy, there you go. She got it. Let's just give it to everyone.
I just want to say great job, Ella, too.
Thank you so much, Ella. Appreciate you.
Like Megan Kelly, you. Put yourself on a motherfucking pedestal, dude.
Okay, anyways, thank you guys so much. Probably gonna go eat or something.
Love it.
What are you guys gonna do? Enjoy it. Thank you so much for being here. It was really important. Thank you guys. Good night. Thanks, mods. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you all. Bye.